What if I told you that right now, as you're watching this, your brain is actively lying to you? Not occasionally, not sometimes, constantly. Every single second of every single day, your mind is constructing a reality that doesn't actually exist, filling in gaps, deleting information. It finds inconvenient and presenting you with a version of the world that feels completely real, but is, in ways that should genuinely disturb you, entirely fabricated. Scientists estimate that up to 11 million bits of information hit your senses every single second, and your conscious mind processes just 50 of them. 50 out of 11 million. So the question you really need to sit with is this: what happened to the rest? Welcome to MindAtlas. And today we're going somewhere most channels are afraid to take you. Let's start with something that researchers discovered and then spent years trying to figure out how to explain to the public without causing a mass existential crisis. Your memories, the ones you're most certain about, the ones you would swear to in a court of law, the ones that define who you think you are not recordings. They are not stored somewhere in your brain like files on a hard drive waiting to be retrieved. Every single time you remember something, your brain reconstructs that memory from scattered fragments, and every single time it does that, it changes it. Slightly. Sometimes significantly. The act of remembering is the act of rewriting, which means the more precious a memory is to you, the more times you visited it, the more distorted it has become. The clearest memories in your mind are often the least accurate. Think about that for a moment. The version of your childhood, your relationships, your most defining moments, those are stories your brain has been editing and re-editing for years, and it never once told you. But it gets darker. Because this isn't just about the past. It's about identity itself. Psychologists who study what's called the narrative self have found that the person you believe yourself to be, your personality, your values, your sense of continuity through time, is essentially a story. A story your brain tells you to create the illusion of a stable, coherent self. Studies show that your personality changes significantly every decade, and yet most people walk around convinced they've always been essentially who they are today. We look back at our younger selves and say, "I was so different then," while simultaneously believing that the person we are right now is the real, permanent version. But that's exactly what every previous version of you thought too. Here's where it gets truly unsettling. Neuroscientist Benjamin Libet conducted a series of experiments in the 1980s that produced results so disturbing to our sense of self that many scientists tried to dismiss them entirely. Libet discovered that the brain initiates movement up to half a second before the person consciously decides to move. The neural activity that produces your actions begins before you're even aware you've made a choice. Your conscious mind, the thing you call you, the voice in your head, the entity you believe is steering your life, may not be making decisions at all. It may simply be watching decisions that were already made and constructing a story afterward about having chosen them. You might not have free will in the way you believe you do. You might be a passenger experiencing the illusion of being a driver. And the unsettling implications don't stop there. Because if your brain is constructing reality, editing your memories, fabricating your identity, and potentially making decisions before you're even conscious of them, then what exactly are you trusting when you trust yourself? Social psychologist Timothy Wilson spent decades studying what he called the adaptive unconscious, the vast machinery of mental processing happening beneath your awareness, and his conclusion was stark. The unconscious mind is so powerful and so separate from conscious thought that we essentially live with a stranger inside us. A stranger who influences what we find attractive, who we trust, how we vote, what we fear, what we want, and who never once consults the conscious you before acting. There's a phenomenon called inattentional blindness that illustrates this horrifyingly well. In the famous experiment, people were asked to watch a video and count how many times players in white shirts passed a basketball. A person in a gorilla suit walked directly through the scene, beat their chest, and walked off. Approximately half of all participants never saw it. Not because they were distracted, not because the gorilla was hidden. Because their brains had decided what to pay attention to, and everything else, including a giant gorilla, was simply deleted from conscious experience. Now ask yourself, what gorillas are walking through your life right now that your brain has decided you don't need to see? The manipulation of reality doesn't just come from within either. The external world has learned to exploit your brain's vulnerabilities with terrifying precision. Researchers studying modern media consumption found that the human brain releases dopamine not when it receives a reward, but when it anticipates one. The brain is wired for seeking, not finding. And every notification, every scroll, every algorithmically optimized piece of content is specifically engineered to keep you in that seeking state indefinitely, always anticipating, never satisfied, locked in a loop that was designed by some of the most sophisticated behavioral science on the planet and aimed directly at the specific weaknesses in your neural architecture. You are not scrolling. You are being scrolled. Sleep deprivation adds another disturbing layer to this. Studies from the University of Berkeley found that going without adequate sleep doesn't just make you tired. It fundamentally alters the emotional processing centers of your brain, making the amygdala, your fear and threat response center, up to 60% more reactive. You become more anxious, more impulsive, more likely to see threats that aren't there, and miss solutions that are. And here's the truly dark part. Chronically sleep-deprived people, when tested, significantly underestimate how impaired they actually are. The more sleep-deprived you are, the less capable you are of recognizing how sleep-deprived you are. The prison locks itself. Researchers studying something called naive realism found that every human being, without exception, operates under the unconscious assumption that they see the world as it actually is, that their perceptions are accurate, that their judgments are fair, and that people who disagree with them are either uninformed or irrational, not biased, not operating from a different but equally valid perspective. Wrong. This belief is so fundamental, so baked into the operating system of human cognition, that even people who intellectually understand it still fall prey to it constantly. You probably nodded along just now thinking about how this applies to other people. Here's what all of this adds up to, and why it matters more than almost anything else you'll encounter today. The world you are living in is not the world. It is a model of the world assembled by a brain that is working with incomplete information, filtered through trauma and conditioning, edited by bias and desire, and presented to you with total confidence. The certainty you feel about reality, that bedrock feeling that what you're experiencing is true and real, that certainty is not evidence of accuracy. It is simply a feature of how the brain works. It produces certainty whether or not it has grounds for it. Ancient philosophers intuited this. Plato's allegory of the cave described people who had spent their entire lives watching shadows on a wall, believing those shadows to be reality, and who would be confused and frightened if someone tried to show them the actual objects casting those shadows. We tend to hear that story and picture ourselves as the person escaping the cave. The disturbing truth is that we are always, to some degree, watching shadows. So what do you do with all of this? You can let it paralyze you, or you can let it liberate you. Because here's what's on the other side of all this darkness: the possibility of actually seeing more clearly. When you understand that your brain constructs reality rather than simply receives it, you gain the ability to question your constructions. When you know your memories are edited, you become more compassionate toward people who remember things differently. When you understand the unconscious machinery driving your choices, you become capable of watching for its fingerprints. Awareness doesn't eliminate the illusions, but it creates just enough distance to choose differently. The mind is the most powerful and most deceptive instrument in the known universe, and you are carrying one around right now, mostly on autopilot. If this is the kind of territory you want to explore, the hidden mechanics of human consciousness, the dark corners of psychology, the shocking science of who we really are, then MindAtlas is exactly where you need to be. Subscribe right now and hit that notification bell, because we go places most channels don't have the nerve to go. The next video might change the way you see everything. Or more accurately, it might show you how little you've been seeing all along.